everybody. It's your friends. You know who we are, Renita and Tara. So,
Hey guys.
welcome. We would like to talk about allyship today. But before I say that, oh, hold up. We're on Zoom, you guys. You can see our face. You see us. What? This is us on a Friday night. So this means we've had maybe a rough week. Or as you can see from my
Knock it off.
it's been
Knock
rough.
it off.
It's my summer hair, but no. So it's a little different. You get to see us and hear us. So,
Yeah. Let
but
us know what you think about that.
yeah, do you like seeing our facial expressions? Because we're both very expressive with.
Oh boy.
But no, seriously, we are going to talk about allyship. And so what happened was, this was a while back. We did an episode about interracial friendships and we spoke about being allies. So we wanted to come back to that and dig a little deeper on what does that mean to us, some of our experiences around allyship. So that's what we're about to do. Tara, you gonna hit them with a definition?
I am, but it's June, guys. Hopefully this gets out in June. I'm sure it will. So it's Pride Month.
True.
Shout out to all my LGBTQ plus
That's
friends.
right. That's right.
But like Renita said, we're going to start with a definition. And I heard this definition in a conference that I was in maybe last week or the week before that. It was a diversity, equity, and inclusion conference. And it just happened to be right on time and on target. So, the definition of allyship that we have here is a person who makes an intentional decision to understand, empathize, and act in support of others. And for me, I think the big part of that is the act piece. And that's something that Renita and I have been talking about when we decided to do this particular episode. And it made me think, like, when did my journey or my quest for allyship start? So I was taking a walk today and I was thinking, like, when did this happen? And as far back as I can remember, I have always been like team underdog, you know? I was always rooting for the person who people didn't think much of. People oh what hmm. The underdog. The underdog. And I think a big part of that was because I always felt like other, you know, in my family and my school, I was always you talk funny, you're weird, just all these other things. And I think for me, it would have been fantastic to have somebody to say, hey, knock it off. So when, oh, the faces have started. so, so when I think allyship, that's what I think of is just, you know, being a voice, acting for somebody who might not have their own voice. What about you, Nitro? When did you come to, or how did you come to allyship and being an ally?
Um, so yeah, that's interesting what you were sharing because you all might have heard this on previous episodes because I know Tara and I have said this. And that way we're quite similar because I feel like although I didn't feel other necessarily in my family, I definitely felt like an other at school and sometimes in bigger um events or functions with a whole bunch of other people that I was kind of different. And like you said, people would be like, oh, you like that kind of music, or um yeah, talk about the way that I spoke. So it was just something that I think not for everybody, but for me, like in what you were saying, I think that did something inside. So that when I specifically, I will say, like in elementary school, I remember noticing that, okay, so us being in St. Louis, typically St. Louis, especially in the 80s, it was like black and white, right? There are other groups, Asian groups, Hispanic, um, Middle Eastern, but at that time, like in my school, it was pretty much black or white. And so I remember noticing when somebody who wasn't black or white came to our school, it was like this internal thing that just made me think like, um, I wonder if they feel different, and kind of like drew me to them. And not like I said, it was, yeah, I was like first or second grade, so it's not like I could really articulate that. But I think when you're like one of maybe three biracial people in the school, and one of them is your brother, like you're like, I know what it's like to not quite fit in these boxes. So like what you're saying is, I just think feeling that way and then noticing other people and thinking like, okay, now I wasn't necessarily acting and advocating for people at that time, but maybe just being your friend, talking to you, acknowledging that you're there.
Right, but I don't want you to like dismiss that, because part of feeling excluded is like like being an ally to someone who is different. Like they have to deal with that exclusion. So being able to like have somebody that they could talk to, or like their friend, I think that's a big part of it. So
Oh
don't
yeah,
say it
no,
like I was just their friend.
no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean just. I wanted to be clear that I didn't want it to come across like, yeah, I thought I was advocating for somebody in first and second grade and like whatever. I wasn't doing all
Got it.
that. I'm extremely, I know it's shocking, but back then I was extremely shy. So
Okay.
people who know me now, like Tara, they're like, girl, you used to not talk. Like, what happened to that person?
True. True.
um, so yeah,
Okay. So it started for us pretty early, I
yeah,
guess, you know.
yeah,
Um, well, I have a question.
sure.
Tell me, um, actually I don't have a question. I want to talk about how you practice this allyship. Is that cool with you?
Yes, I'm
It's
good.
cool with me. So we talked about getting it right,
Mm-hmm.
and how like if you are being an active ally, you are more than likely getting it wrong sometimes,
Yes.
and that's okay. You
Yes.
know, like this is it's messy work, you know, and I think it's fair to say like be patient and be easy with yourself, especially if you're new to the game, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
just like take it easy with yourself. But I wanted to know for you, can you tell me about like you talked about in first and second grade, but can
Mm-hmm.
you talk about a time where you like were a pretty awesome ally, or you had like a misstep when you were being an ally?
Well, I definitely have a story about a misstep. And before I do share that, I just want to piggyback on something you were saying to when we're talking about an action and doing something and getting it wrong. I want everybody to remember that it's to me it's like constructive criticism, right? Or you have your job review, right? And they tell you the areas where you're excelling and then some areas where maybe you're challenged. So it's the same thing in this work. Like somebody might say to you, hey, you missed the boat, or that's what you said or didn't say was or wasn't helpful. And to be able to hear that, right, and not
Yeah.
try not to be defensive or make it let you feel guilty or feel bad, right, but take it like, okay, this is like you were saying, you're learning, this is ongoing. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right, Did I jump
Yeah.
out of turn talking about that?
No, there's no how to turn.
Okay, I could. We did chat about this a little bit, so I want to make sure I'm doing.
Don't tell all the secrets. Let's just let this flow, okay?
Let it
Dang.
go. Okay, so a misstep was I was in my 20s and I was at a job where we were I had a coworker who was a lot younger than me, and she shared some different things with me that I think just showing some of her interests, right? And I didn't think much of what was being shared. I mean, think much about it, like what that meant, and it was pretty much showing me, I guess, kind of like crushes that she had,
Mhm.
and they were all women, but I didn't realize it was anything about a crush. I thought she was just showing me various actresses and like singers,
Sorry.
you know,
Yeah.
celebrities that she was interested. So later on, a situation came up where there was a comment made or something that kind of an exchange that happened around her sexuality and her being a lesbian. And it was one of those things where it was like, whoop, it went right over my head. And I was like, whoa, when she was showing me that, I didn't make that connection to her sexuality. I
Mhm.
thought this were just people she liked, and I didn't think much of it until this situation happened. And because I was not realizing that, I didn't speak up at the time to be like, hey, what's happening? So after it was kind of like it happened, and I was like, oh. And then I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, damn, I didn't say anything, and I consider myself an ally. Plus, I think a piece of me too, feeling like an older person, was like, I step up and advocate for you not only because you're a lesbian, but because you're younger, and like the idea of ageism, and sometimes the idea that we can sometimes people can be dismissive of younger people.
Yeah.
So after this situation occurred, I went to her and I said, you know what, I really want to apologize because I didn't ever think about your sexuality. And then when it came into a comment or a situation, I didn't speak up for you, and I just really wanted her to know that I was sorry, and that it sounded like I don't know what the right word is, but I was like, I really never thought about it. Um and she was very understanding, and was like, no, I know and she's like, it's okay. And I was like, but it wasn't okay to me, because I felt like, oh my gosh, how did I miss this?
Mhm.
And so I've said to Tara before, like, I think sometimes around like sexuality or age, I really don't. When I meet somebody, I'm just not thinking about that as much. So sometimes to other people, it's very blatant, and they're like, "You, how you didn't notice this?" And I'm like, "No, I really wasn't thinking about it." And so yeah, so I felt bad, and I was just kind of like, I can't believe I didn't advocate for her and left her hanging. But like I said, not but. So I acknowledged what I did, and it was just like, okay, next time this is not going to happen. So
Right. I think in hearing that story, I would say, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. Um,
whoa, do it again.
like, no, like I think part of being an ally is creating like this space, right, where people feel safe to just show up,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I think in her sharing that, like book of crushes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if you didn't recognize that she was a lesbian, like she felt like she had that like safe space with you to be able to share that. So I think that's really cool. Even if you do, like we said, there's gonna be mistakes, right? And like you apologize, hope your apology is accepted, and then keep trying, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Anyway, when you were talking, it made me think of something. So right before this, now I'm gonna tell all the secrets.
Tell
We
them
were
all.
like, I know, did I have a story about like allyship? And you made me think about um my husband and my son and I were on a walk on the trail, and there was a man and his son walking.
Mm-hmm.
So we were crossing paths.
Okay.
And the boy obviously had like a disability.
Okay.
I can't name what it is, but he had like a visible disability.
Okay.
And I noticed like my son like looking at him,
Mm-hmm.
and then we said hi. We had said hi to the other family, and then we kept walking. And my son was like, "Well, what's wrong with him?" And so like we stopped, and then we had a conversation about like how people come into the world differently, and we're
Mm-hmm.
all very different. And I wish I knew exactly what the words were. And you know how you're struggling to like explain something to a kid that
Yeah.
you don't necessarily get yourself. And so I'm like, and then and people are all different, and we just accept people for who they are, and we don't stare. It's okay to ask questions and blah blah blah. And he's like, oh, he's just different. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like for him, it was just that simple. So that's what you made me think of, because you mentioned like the ageism piece.
Mm-hmm.
And like it made me think of that, because I'm on the board at work for the disability group, and then I'm on the board for mental illness. And like
She's
that's
on
something.
all the boards, y'all.
I'm on all the boards. I
Give
have
it
no
up.
time.
Give it up for her because she's on all the
That's
boards.
not why I said that. Why I
I
said
know
that
you did.
was
I know you did it. I'm saying give it up for you.
no, because I came specifically to disability in a very uncomfortable situation. Like I was almost afraid of it, because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to screw it up, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And in my workplace, they didn't have anybody to lead this group. And one of the leaders were like, hey, I think you'd be amazing. Will you do it? And for months, like 2 months, I was like,
No.
nope.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to support. I will do everything you need, but no, I'm not going to lead it. And then finally, the universe came in and calmed me and was like, you can do this. And like, anyway, disability it could be really uncomfortable. And I think that's a place where, like, I try to not try, I am an ally,
Mm-hmm.
and like, I mess it up.
Mm-hmm.
I mess it up, and I apologize and keep going. Anyway, I got all on a tangent.
No, I think that's good. Can we go back to something can I ask you a question about
I don't like when you go back to stuff. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
um when you said you were like, what do you mean scared you were going to, didn't you say scared I was going to mess up, or the hesitancy was, what can you share? Like, what was your fear? Was it saying something that was
It
wrong?
was using all the wrong terms
Okay.
and saying it to someone who has a disability, because there's this argument about disability or different ability, or like there's
Differently abled.
yes.
Yeah.
And I was just like terrified to get it wrong and offend somebody, because that wouldn't be my intention.
Well, no, I think that's good you brought that up because I think we should talk about that a little bit more because there are so many terms, right?
Yeah.
And I think when I talk to people sometimes, I can tell people feel a little overwhelmed. They're like, well, now people are using cisgendered and non-binary. And I do think that the world is a changing place, right? One thing that's always consistent is change, right? Is that what I want to say? It's always
That
happening.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that, which to me it's understandable that it can seem a little overwhelmed, like what do I say? But I think we have to take a step back. And I don't know about you, but if I'm unsure, I feel like you can ask somebody and say, for instance, do you if you're talking to somebody and go, well, do you prefer Latino or Latina or Latinx or Hispanic? I feel like if you ask somebody, yes, somebody could get offended or they could get huffy with you, right? That could happen. But I guess in most of the situations I've had where I wasn't sure, or if I asked a question, people, because I did it in, a kind way and not a like, what are you type of thing. They
Yeah.
said, I prefer this, because people will say that, well, do I say black or African American?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, if the person has already, whatever term they've already used, I would use. Or like I remember a professor had said, whatever's in like an article, use that. But I think most people, I shouldn't say most, but I think that more likely than not, people, if you ask and you sound, in a kind way and ask, that people will let you know, right? Because I think we get really caught, like you were saying. So, I hear that so much, like, I don't want to offend somebody, I don't want to offend somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we do, and we don't even know it. And I don't know. I don't know about you, but I feel like when I've been on the other side where I potentially could be offensive, I feel like I know when the person gives
It's
two
coming.
shits
Yeah.
and says whatever they want, as opposed to somebody who's like, so do I say mixed for you? Do I say biracial? Or they say, is that So I think you can tell
Yeah.
somebody who I feel like genuinely is like, I'm trying to just know what to say. It is. Our world changes. There's a lot happening and a lot of things that we're adapting to. So we do be patient and kind with ourselves to be like, okay, you know, I'm trying to get with things that maybe are just so different and we don't even understand, right? But
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. I
yeah.
hear you. What else? I'm
Um what
looking
was
at my little notes.
I well, yeah, I think we covered,
Wait, how much time are we in? Because I'm gonna ask a question
you
and I
know,
want to know how you respond.
go ahead, because you know what, I don't think I can see the time on
Oh,
this one. It must be down, I don't know where it is, why I can't see it, but go ahead, because I don't think it's been that long.
okay. So I haven't thought this one all the way out. I just see a note
Okay.
here that's like, it says, what privilege do you have and how do you use it?
Okay.
So that makes me think like, as an ally, you're probably coming to a situation where you have privilege in a way that maybe someone else does.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be a black person in this situation with, you know, privilege.
Yep.
Like what do you think about that statement? And yeah, I hadn't fleshed it all the way out, but I feel like it's important to talk about it here. So like, okay, I'm gonna go way out there. So like Christians
Mm-hmm.
typically have like this like well-known privilege in the US. You go to the hotel, you got your Bible in the drawer, you know, you can rock your cross with no side eye.
Right.
So like
Our
as a
holidays are represented. There's breaks for Christian holidays.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking. So as a Christian, you can you can serve as an ally to a person who is Muslim or whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
So, how can we use our privilege
Mm-hmm.
as an ally? Is that a good question?
I know. Well, I think I know where you're going because, like, so you know because you know me, but like my mom's been doing diversity work for a long time. So when we would go to some of the workshops, or I went to this camp back in high school, and it talked
You went
about,
to diversity camp?
yeah,
Oh
shout
boy.
shout out to Anytown. It was like,
Oh,
yeah, it was like one of the best. It was like a challenging, hard, and draining thing, but at the same time, such a wonderful, deep, like, yeah, I honestly, it's something I like. I said, I don't even know if it'll still be around when SJ, my son, is old enough, but I wish I had more money to just like make sure every kid could do it because I just think it's really powerful. But
yeah.
sorry. Shout out to that because that was something we talked about. So a lot of times they'll say we have multiple identities like what you're talking about, right? So the targeted group and the non-targeted group. So I understand that I'm a heterosexual woman and there's
Mhm.
privilege to that. And, I walk down the street with my husband and I hold his hand, or I say, I use language for heterosexual couples and people don't look at me sideways. They don't think much, right? But I know that somebody else who could be in the LGBTQ plus group doesn't have some of those same privileges, or just same, like, okay, they could hold the hand of their partner and people look, or they stare, they make comments, or they say don't
Yeah.
do that. So I think that's what I get. I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but I think sometimes, and this is just my personal feeling, is that we sometimes forget that because of our many identities and layers, that there are some privileges. Sometimes it's very easy to be like, well, I'm in this, and this, and I have nothing, there's nothing. And it's like, well,
Right.
there are some areas that I'm in the non-targeted group. Like you and
Right.
I are both educated. We have a college background, college degrees. And so, for some folks, that is seen as, we have access to certain things, or we're treated in a certain way because of our education, right?
Right.
Or also being raised in Christian homes. And like you said, like, I never had to question, like, would I be off for Easter, or could I,
Right.
um, you talk about Jesus or something in some scripture in the Bible, and people didn't think, oh my God, what is she doing?
Right.
Um,
No, you okay. So you just said something that made me think of something else. You talked about you and your husband, and then how the LGBTQ plus population can't necessarily, I mean, they may not feel comfortable to to live the same way, right?
mhm,
So then my question is like, how do you hold space for them? And one of the things that I thought about is we have um friends who call their spouses partners,
mhm,
just to make room for everyone. Like,
true.
you can assume whatever you want,
Mhm.
but this is my partner. And when we talked about it, I was like, man, that's awesome. And then I wanted to do it one day, and it was so uncomfortable for me.
Oh,
Oh,
interesting.
yeah, yeah, I know. I was like, I, I want to do this. And like, I still have this bit of like, I
What
don't
should
know.
it be associated with that when you say partner? Is that what?
Yeah.
No, that's a fair and honest thing, right? Because even you and I are talking about being allies. We're talking about missteps. We're talking about our own feelings about
Yep.
uncomfortability. around those things. And it's interesting you brought that up, because I was thinking I could do a better job of using different terminology, and I haven't gotten on that train as much as I, like you're saying, I could have said my partner, and then like you said, they're gonna think whatever. And I think I need to be more conscious of
Yeah.
doing that kind of thing, because that's a way, like you said, that can hold space. And it's sometimes second nature to say things that are around heterosexuality, right? Because
Yes.
that's what we know. We grew up where that was what you saw on TV, and that's safe. And now it's like, okay, I have to think about that, and I have to be more proactive and slow down a bit to be like, okay, I could use different language that's more inclusive.
Okay. That's going to be our homework, me and yours.
Got it.
Okay. Okay.
um so
Yes.
we have some takeaways for our
Wait, I
listeners.
want to go
Oh,
back really
yeah.
quick and then we can have some takeaways.
No, that's fine.
I was talking about my son on the trail
Mm-hmm.
and he had called the boy different. But what he said was, he's different but the same. Okay,
Oh,
cool. Like he's a kid, he's just a
yeah.
little different. And that to me was like that light bulb moment. That's the piece that I missed. And I think that's why it didn't
Uh-huh.
quite hit the way that I needed it to hit. But he's different but the same. Okay, like let's finish our walk sort of thing,
See, isn't
like
that what's so wonderful about kids? Because I honestly
it's
feel like they're just like, okay, because they don't attach value to something, right? It's
right.
just like, we I don't know about you, but I've gotten certain things, like if my son was, I felt like kind of staring, like we were out of town and he heard, I think he was staring maybe a little bit because he heard another language, and so he was stopping and kind of looking. And a part of me was like, okay, I'm interpreting through an adult lens of like, don't
Right.
stare at people. And then another part of me knew, like, I think he really was just like, okay, I'm taking this in, I'm listening, or maybe I hear something that's different, right?
Mhm.
And like you said with your son, when you stop and have a conversation, I feel like they're like, okay, you answered my question, move along. That
Right. And
they don't. I had just as another kid example, and it's like another reason why I love kids, because they're just honest, and it's just like, all right. When I was in that graduate teaching program, one of the schools I taught at had a lot of different, uh, like, there's a big Polish community in Chicago. So there's a lot of Polish children, Hispanic slash Latino children, Latinx, I should say, I guess. Um, and at that school there was some Asian children and some Black kids, right? So we, in our classroom, we had just an interesting mix of children. And one time I was teaching whatever, and one of the students asked me, I don't remember how she asked, but pretty much wanted to know like my racial background. And so then I
Mhm.
explained that I was biracial. And then she just looked at me and she was like, okay. And she went on. And I just kind of chuckled, like she was just, I mean, it's normal for us to, our brain, right, is trying to understand things, and we put them in boxes. And that kind of gets like a bad name. But that's a typical thing. Like when a kid is little, right? We tell
Mhm.
you, if a bird, if it has wings and it tweets, it's a bird. But then we don't necessarily define each type of bird, right? And so I think that's kind of what kids will do. Like, you've told me this and this, so I put this kind of in a box, but there's no value attached. It's just trying
Yeah.
to understand their world. So it's, yeah, I just, sometimes I just love when kids do something, and I feel like us adults are like, oh yeah.
Struggling. I know we struggle to get it out and
Yeah.
make it make sense with all of our values.
Right.
place on it, or
Yeah.
and then they're like, oh, okay, and then they moved on about life, and they have this little understanding. Yeah.
True.
All right,
All right.
takeaways.
Take
What do
away.
you have, Nitro?
Um, I think just going back to, if you decide you are wanting to be an ally, like we said, the focus to me typically is on doing. And when you do, sometimes you're going to fall on your face or feel embarrassed or feel like, ooh. And sometimes you're going to feel really good and be like, I did this and that. And that's part of the journey. And I think each situation you learn something from, and be open, because hopefully the people that you're around, especially if you have a relationship with them, are going to be kind with it, gracious with it. Of course, there might be some people that aren't, but you know,
Yeah.
don't get so caught up in, like, am I doing it right? Or, trying to be like the top notch ally. Just do what you can. And you know what? Also, to be fair, there are times where you spoke about this, I think in one of our lives on Instagram, where you may not have the space or energy to maybe show up because maybe you're dealing with some other things, and to give yourself a certain amount of pass and grace with that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you can't fight, I don't want to say necessarily fight every fight, but kind of like, you can't always be at every place and say this and get this and be like, oh, I'm doing that and that. It's draining. This, like you said, this is
Yeah.
messy work, this is tough work, this is deep work. So, just keep keep on, and you know just keep on.
I love that. And mine is going to be, think of conversations as a croissant and not a donut.
What?
No, seriously, I forgot where I heard this. But
Yeah.
when people in a group are talking and like they make this circle, and there's not room for anybody else to enter because there's a circle, right? You're
Mhm.
frozen. Oh, you're not frozen. But instead of, like, if you're in this conversation, like, space yourself so that it becomes a croissant that leaves room for other people
Oh, that's
to
interesting.
join the conversation.
Oh, I never heard
Yeah.
that. Huh. Okay.
Yeah, that's my takeaway.
I like it.
Be a croissant, not a donut.
Sorry, donuts. We got love for you, but not in the ally world.
Right? Well, thank you for joining us
Yep.
again. We hope you got something from this episode. We look forward to seeing you again. And if you have any input or comments, where do they leave them?
They hit us up. You can hit us
Oh,
up
just
on
hit us up.
Instagram, hit us up on YouTube. There's always space to let us know. And let us know what you think about us being on Zoom.
I know. All right,
I think
guys.
they can hear you better. That one.
What is that?
You. My bad. Which
Oh,
way?
I'm over there?
Well, I'm going like this
You're
because,
down here.
oh, well, you're to my side to.
Okay, let's not be weird. Okay, have a
Too late.
fantastic day.
We're weird.
Bye.
All right. Peace.